Okay, for people joining this live stream, we are talking about Wolfram language design. This is part of our language completeness and consistency series. Our first topic is an option for delete object. And I guess this has come up because we had an unfortunate situation with somebody who deleted their home directory in the cloud. And it's kind of like typing rm-r star in Unix, and everything went away, and that's super traumatic. So what we do with delete directory is we have a delete contents.
Delete with contents is
right, which is just like the F, the RM-F or something, if I remember correctly.
Well, it's the RF of RM, right? It goes recursively in and deletes everything inside of it.
Yes, but delete with contents or delete contents? No,
it is delete content.
Okay, yeah, it's delete contents. Yeah.
All right.
Why is it the case that when I am in here and I hit return at that stage, that it gets confused?
Because it thinks you're asking for a search. You need to press down arrow once to accept that suggestion, and then it will. Which, if there are multiple things still there, is obviously the correct behavior. It's a bit more debatable whether, when there's only one thing, if it should still behave that way.
Yeah, I think that's a user assistance topic. If somebody can put it in that meeting, that would be good.
I've got a note.
It occurs to me we should be live streaming the user assistance stuff for people who are interested. Okay. Okay, so delete object, when applied to a cloud object that is a directory, if the default setting for delete contents is false, then it will refuse to delete it. And that would have solved the problem that happened right now. Is that correct?
Yep.
Right. On the other hand, changing the default would break a great deal of non-experimental code. So, right. So I think there I've listed a few different issues, right? So one thing is, right, you can use delete file and delete directory on cloud objects. So if you want something that behaves like delete file or delete directory, you can just use those. And delete contents is a little bit weird for, then there's a naming thing.
Yeah, right? I agree.
It's a little weird. I mean, it makes sense when it's delete directory, but when it's delete object, which can be any sort of.
So if I say delete file on a cloud object that is a file, it will just do the right thing. It'll delete the cloud object.
Yep, correct.
Okay. So in the case that happened here, the user should have used delete file. Is that correct?
I think so.
And then delete file would have said,
this isn't a file.
Can't do that.
Right. And if they'd said delete directory, it would have said, this thing is not empty.
Correct. But I think I think the documentation promotes delete object, because then you don't have to worry about doing a bunch of checks on what the actual object is. Which,
so the documentation should change.
Yeah. But that's why it's. I think we. Again, I'm not sure, but I think that's what Bob had talked about before. But we sort of promote delete object more for cloud stuff.
We shouldn't. I mean, this is the argument for not doing that.
Well, I think we should talk about all of them. Yeah.
Well, I think we should.
What do you mean,
delete
all of
object?
Well, I think I think that the documentation page on cloud object should have an example of delete file, delete directory, and delete object. Right? Boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, right, and compare them.
Should say what the difference is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And say delete object will work with no questions asked on anything.
Right.
Arnaud, do you think that's a satisfactory solution?
There's especially cases where, like, you have an index.html and you don't even realize that the cloud object is a directory, and you just want to use delete object, right? Definitely, they're definitely good use cases for delete object and cloud object.
Oh no, do you have any further comments on this?
Well, I mean, there's two options. Either delete object takes an option like
No,
delete
we just went
does.
through this. We just went through this. We don't think that's a good idea because we can't change the default. Right, we can't change the default. So taking an option isn't really going to help anybody. They're still going to blow themselves up. Unless they read the documentation carefully enough to know, by the time they're reading the documentation that carefully, they're probably not typing rm-r star, on their top level directory.
So then what are you suggesting? Delete, what
we just said, that we promote delete file and delete directory to be the things you use to delete files and delete directories in the cloud, and delete object is a lower level operation that you use sparingly, just like you use rm-rf star sparingly in Unix.
But it would still delete directories if you use delete object?
Yes, it would. Yes, it would.
Okay, then I disagree with that.
Okay, but you're wrong because we can't change it for the reasons that were just said. We can put another option in and nobody will ever see it and we'll have the exact same problem.
Okay, I'm just advocating, what I think.
What are you advocating? You're advocating that we break tons of code that says delete object because one user typed the wrong thing? No, we're not going to do that. End of story. I mean, this was a pure user error, correct? There was no system error. This was a pure user error. They typed delete object on their home directory. Is that correct?
That's correct. And there are some safeguards on the cloud side, so you can't actually delete your root directory, but you can still delete anything underneath it. So that's what happened.
Right. I mean, it's very unfortunate, and I feel for that person. I've made mistakes like that myself, not for a long time, I have to say, touch wood. But that's not
I did it just last month, and that's why I have nightly backups.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and hopefully we have appropriate backups and so on. That's a different issue.
Yep.
Why are there safeguards for the root directory?
What's that?
Why are there safeguards for the root directory?
Specifically, so just on our end, in case there was bad code on our end or other stuff like that. I don't know the specific reasoning. I just know it's there. I know that Joel and the Cloud Object team had it there.
How about we remove that and eat our own dog food?
Sorry, say it again.
Why don't we remove that and eat our own dog food?
Well,
you certainly don't want somebody to put a file at their home directory.
Yeah,
that's not a directory. Yeah,
and that's more a feature on cloud. That's not really, the fact that it's there isn't really super relevant to delete object. It just
I don't think that's a bad safeguard. I think that's something that's a reasonable thing to do, given that we have some anchoring of users. It makes sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're done with this particular thing, but we need to make sure that we do a good job of changing the way the documentation encourages people to use delete file and delete directory.
Right, and certainly if tech support, Peter, if you have opinions that you want to share on how to write it, or you want help creating specific tech support notes, I'm certainly available. I don't want to volunteer John, but I'm reasonably confident that John would also be available.
Right. I think we can
be glad to participate.
Solved. Okay, let's go on to the next topic if we can, and the people who are here for delete object can drop if they wish. Okay, date string format.
Right. So this is something that was brought to me that apparently if you're using a desktop Wolfram language, then there's a universal default of, right, which I think is the US, short version, if I recall correctly. And on the
cloud, I report this, or is this something somebody else?
No, this came up from cloud. It caused some issues in various cloud handling, to where if you're in a depending on your time zone, you got a different date string format, and then certain code thought you were in the future and didn't handle that well, and other things like that. So it was sort of an unexpected result from how this was
right,
there.
Or people who try to
rely on date string,
right, people who try to parse date strings themselves and don't take into account $DateStringFormat, and then they would get errors because it was DateStringFormat ended up being ambiguous or wrong from what they were, or different from what they were expecting.
I'm sorry, I was not paying enough attention here. Could you try again, please? What is the proposal?
So the proposal is to make cloud make cloud match desktop or $DateStringFormat always has. There's a little there's a little prototype example in the next section, right? Date time short, right? So, and desktop, any copy of Mathematica, if you're in Greece, if you have a desktop in Greece, or if you take your laptop to China, right, you always get that. Whereas in the cloud, it sort of depends on your geolocation. Oh, wow. Why is that so different?
It's always like that in the cloud. It's never date time short. It's always an explicit value, but that explicit value varies depending on your geolocation, inferred geolocation.
Okay, I didn't even realize. Jesse, I didn't realize they never matched.
Are you still on the opposite side of the world, Jesse? You could demo this if you're still on the opposite. Are you still on the opposite side of the world?
Yes, I am. I'm checking.
Where in the world are you?
I'm on VPN, so as far as the cloud's concerned, I'm in Champaign.
Oh, okay.
Where in the world is Jesse Friedman?
I'm in South Korea.
Oh, cool.
Okay.
So the proposal is just to no longer set it by dollar geolocation.
You mean to not have this happen?
Yes, that's correct, right, Jesse?
Yes, that's correct. The proposal is to just remove all of the special logic that the cloud does regarding $DateStringFormat, which is to set it based on inferred geolocation.
Right, and so the motivation is, some class of users get unexpected failures because they don't know to account for this, and the other is apparently, Jesse is more the expert here, but my understanding is if you compare with, Java and a lot of other languages which have built-in date time functionality, the language has a default. So we're a bit odd in that our language has this location dependence.
Yeah, but we're also a language that actually knows something about the world, which most do not. So, I mean, I think.
Well,
go ahead.
In other languages, it's more that if there is a function that returns a localized date string, it's actually called that, like locale date string or date localized or whatever, rather than having that be the default for the one date string function. And I'll note that we actually do have a named date string format. There's a whole set of named date string formats prefixed with locale. There's locale date short, locale date full, that are based on, I think, the operating system locale rather than anything about your inferred geolocation. But if there were, in theory, anything to have be dependent on geolocation, it would be that rather than the main default. Okay. Those will show up if you go to the date string page.
Oh, see, this is where I go crazy with our documentation. We shouldn't do this. This grandfathering thing where it's not listed separately on this page, we shouldn't do it.
And I think it's on Brian's queue to figure out a way to do it where we actually keep all the pages in sync instead of having 17 distinct, inconsistent copies.
Okay. Well, so what you're suggesting is we should have yet another family called geolocation date short or something.
I'm honestly not that convinced that the geolocation based date string thing is that useful. If anything were to change, I thought about it a little bit. I thought maybe the cloud could look at there's the accept language HTTP header that browsers send, but machines scripts generally don't. So that includes the locale that the browser thinks that the user wants. That's usually used to decide what language to return, but it should be possible to infer like the standard date format for the user's language based on that.
Don't think that works for Latin America, does it? I thought that many of those countries have different date formats, even though.
Well, the locale is something like EN-US, English as used in the United States.
Okay, fine. So you're saying that would be enough information,
right? One would want to test to make sure that it works and that browsers are really as well behaved as I seem to think that they are. But I think that's sort of a more reliable thing to go off of than geolocation, which is inherently
right. Where too many people live on Null Island. The population of Null Island is in the hundreds of millions or something.
Well, it's more about the fact that geo-IP is inherently an inexact science, and sometimes very, very inexact.
No, that's why I'm saying that it lands on Null Island at 00 or something too often, for example.
Or alternatively, right, my geolocation correctly says that I'm in the United States, but my browser is set to prefer Hebrew web pages. So in that sense, it would be appropriate to prefer Hebrew things for me.
Oh, so you would prefer the Hebrew date format then?
That's a little bit of a edge case. But I certainly wouldn't object to it, I guess is my claim.
So your claim is as soon as you set the locale for your browser to thing X, that you'll be okay with it using that as your date format.
Yep.
And just to be crystal clear about what was, at least for me, the big problem with this, it was not the fact that in a cloud notebook you get different results depending on your location, but it's like with cloud APIs, the runtime behavior of a cloud API can be unexpectedly different depending on the location of the client that's calling it. So that's why I think basing it off of the accept language browser header, which non-browser machines usually don't send, that sort of mostly eliminates that issue. I still don't think it should be the default. I think it should be that behavior should only kick in if it's one of these locale-based date formats. But I think that helps with. That further eliminates the possibility of code behaving unexpectedly differently than the author intended, because the author didn't realize that they're getting a locale-based date format.
Jesse, thank you for being up at this ridiculous time of day.
You're welcome.
Is that a system function I don't know about? Local time?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Now you do.
Okay.
Yep, now I do. I usually just call date object with a time zone or specification or something.
That's a good way to do this.
One comment: $DateString format affects DateString and date object, and in a sense, date object is safer because it inserts the date format if it's not default. So I wonder whether there is any consequence there.
Wait a second. So let's just summarize what we think we want to do. So Jesse is making the point that for generic programmatic purposes, date time short should be the default for $DateString format. There is the option by the user to make it locale DateString short, in which case they're going to use a browser locale if a browser locale is provided. If no locale is provided, it will fall back to being DateString short again. And that this cleverer than whatever thing for the cloud will go away. And the cloud, in the case of Cloud Evaluate, even though it might have some guess from GeoIP, well, it probably wouldn't from Cloud Evaluate, but even though it might have some guess from GeoIP, we will not use that. We will only use locale information, which will only be available from browsers. Ethan is commenting on a live stream about Wolfram engines running in AWS clouds and in different zones. No, this will not affect that. I mean, the question of the local time zone is a different question, right? How is that being handled? That's being handled based on a system clock. Isn't that correct? What does the system clock have the time zone? I'm now
right. So the actual system clock, the hardware system clock does not, but in any reasonably modern operating system, it knows and it translates, and it basically, right? Basically, your OS settings say, is the hardware clock set to UTC or is it set to local time? And then the OS takes the care of translating everything. And if that setting is wrong, then you'll notice it because your computer will never match what your phone or watch says.
Recall that we have dollar system time zone, which is supposed to be the computer time zone. Dollar time zone is the time zone that you can set yourself.
Okay.
And which by default is dollar system time zone.
Okay, I think that's well, I don't know where I hit.
Right. So presumably, right, this went to our local colo, and right, which is why you're getting central time for your cloud evaluate.
Right. Oh, that all looks correct. Okay, and this is what Jesse got off VPN. Oh, okay, that's totally different. That is but Jesse, I don't know how far your Korean language learning has gone, but is your locale setting to Korean or America or US?
Well, it's US, but that's irrelevant. This should be based on my IP address only.
Okay. Fine.
And year, month, day is correct. 12 and 24-hour format are both used here.
Okay. Well, so in other words, all right. So this was a success, but we don't think it was the right thing to do. So I think have we converged on what we think the right thing to do is? Fairly straightforward. It's just we remove this cleverness here, and we support and document properly this locale date string format.
That sounds like what we agreed to.
Okay. Anybody disagree with that? No.
I don't disagree, but I would like to understand, and this is probably a separate discussion with Jesse, about what is it that fails when using the other, because I mean, all date computation should work.
It's not a problem with date computation itself. It's a problem with when developers mistakenly assume that or don't even realize that they're mistakenly assuming that date string always returns something in a fixed format. So it was, I mean, it's fundamentally when this behavior combines with a bug or with a poor coding practice, but it nevertheless happened, and it caused, at least for me, some pretty annoying problems, because it's very difficult to diagnose why your cloud object is working fine for users in the US, including yourself, but not for users outside of the country.
Right. I mean, it's a slight, protecting people from not having read the documentation, but it's probably a reason.
Well, actually, no, it's not. This isn't documented. The geolocation changing stuff in the cloud is not documented. It is implied by the fact that $DateStringFormat says there's a note to the effect of something like, it is typically date short.
Oh,
that's all it says.
How disgusting. Okay. Is this a typo, i.e. lat n? Okay, it's a separate.
Yeah, I don't know.
Looks like it.
Yeah. Okay. I think we're done with this topic. Is that true?
I think so.
Okay, we should let Jesse go, and thank you, Jesse, for being here for this.
No problem. Thank you for agreeing with me.
Thanks, Jesse. Bye.
Bye.
I'm gonna drop as well. So thanks.
Okay, sounds good. Okay. Equal and color.
Right. So right now, if you use equal as opposed to same Q, right? I mean, everybody I think agrees on what same Q things should actually be the same.
Yep.
Now users sometimes use equal with colors, and if they happen to be the same color space, then it will, evaluate. But if it's not, then it'll just return unevaluated, which is what I showed there.
Okay, so is that proposal to do something different, or are we proposing some color equal weirdness?
We're proposing the color equal is just the prototype that Piotr whipped together. But basically, the proposal is equal if all the arguments to equal are in fact color Q, then convert them to, I think it's XYZ color, whichever a universal color space, and compare them there.
Okay, question.
Okay.
So, for example, with Unicode characters that have, we just went over this with combiner characters and things, equal does not do something special in that case. Is that a true statement?
That is a true statement.
Do we like that? Or should it, in fact, do normalization? Which I don't think will be stupid at all.
Okay.
And I have another question here, which is that I guess pattern matching is a same Q story, right?
Yes. Right. I mean, you can obviously do something with pattern test and say, is this thing equal to something, and get at it that way. But if you're doing actual pattern matching, then it's
right. Well, I mean, I think it would be enhancing equals, which is a good thing. I'm wondering what other cases there are where we can generalize that idea. I mean, like for example, if I have a sparse array and I have a dense array that is the same array.
Well, equal already handles that.
Let me see that.
And any structured array as well. So
okay, so if I say if I just make a random array. Okay, then I say sparse array. Nice.
Right, and if
then it's going to be easy to sell me on the color case.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure I've implicitly used that what that just did many times. I haven't really thought about it, which is good. But again, I want to raise the question. I think combiner characters should work this way too.
I remember a related discussion in terms of entities. Should two entities be equal, under equal? And we rejected it in that case because it was potentially too much of a slippery slope.
Well, that one has bizarre time-dependent stuff. What was an example of that? That was. What's an example of that?
Well, country entities and historical country entities. I mean.
Oh yeah, right. That is an absolute unbelievable can of worms. Yeah, no, I agree that's. I mean, in the hierarchical entities discussion we're having, there will be some additional kind of things like that, but I think it's a separate issue. Okay, let's talk about the color case. Is there something? Is there something controversial here, or is it fairly straightforward? We promote to a universal color space and do the comparison.
So colors, I think, is relatively uncontroversial. I guess we should give anybody who has an objection a chance to object, but I haven't heard any objection to that.
So something with an alpha channel of 1 is the same as something without an alpha channel. True statement?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. What about image equality in different color spaces?
So that is the next bullet point in the section, which is, what do you do if things, right? So there I chose, in fact, a slightly even simpler problem of, image, but you change image size. Is that still the same image or not?
I think so. I think so.
Right.
Okay, so to make it even more difficult, what about graphics? We don't have sophisticated equality testing for graphics.
We do not. You'll see that, right, that example right there. Right. So as far as I know, we don't have any precedent for, ignoring options in equal. Right. So graph, if the options are different, returns false. Graphics just returns unevaluated. Yeah, and I don't, right. In fact, and I don't even, I know Brett can probably speak better to this point, but it's not even clear to me what it necessarily means for two graphics to be equal if you have.
They paint ink in the same places, but they might have a rectangle or they might have a polygon.
Yeah, I was wondering whether we, have some hierarchy of equivalency on things.
Yes, I mean, the question is, what is the meaning of equivalence, right? It's some, boy, this relates to our observer theory from the physics project and all kinds of crazy things.
Right. And for example, I can't claim to know what are all the options to image off the top of my head, but
interlacing, with how the interlacing is done.
Right. But on some level, there's still, some basic raster, which we're treating as a numerical array that we're comparing. And that I sort of understand. But with graphics, axes goes to true or false. Is that, I don't know if people would agree on whether those two graphics are the same. They certainly look different.
Right. Well, let me point out a major precedent that we have.
Okay.
Which is okay, what's that going to do? Kaboom.
Right. But if you look at n of 278, you'll see that was stripped before it was parsed.
I know.
In this direction, there is a danger that we might break some equations in which users used strange objects as variables.
I see. So your point is, let's say that we had the case of clearly we better not think that red and blue are the same there.
Right, or equal to green, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. I think Jose was more worried about the case where somebody had blue circle equal to, 24.
Or green circle.
Yes.
I don't want the false there immediately.
Because see.
Perhaps those are my X and Y.
Sorry, I don't understand. Green, what?
If you write X equal Y, it stays unevaluated. So I could still write blue circle equal red circle and want it to stay unevaluated.
Sure.
Right, we would be breaking if we started having graphics.
Gosh, I see what you're saying. So you can't do that. I mean, if I say string AAA equals string BB, it's false.
Right.
So in other words, strings we're treating as literals, And the question is, how far do we go and treat it? So right now, if I have the red color swatch and I say red equals blue, I get that. So the proposal is to change that.
Right, which I think, I think with red and blue, it's relatively uncontroversial. In fact, I'm a bit surprised that doesn't evaluate, right? Because shouldn't those both evaluate to an RGB color? And we look at full form of N of 285.
No, it is an RGB color. It's just it doesn't resolve.
Okay.
It doesn't resolve.
Well, okay. Well, I thought because of the heads were the same. I guess it was right. Right.
That's just going to stay like that.
Okay. Right. Whereas f of 1 equals f of 1 will give true. Yes.
Right.
Yeah, I was momentarily confused. I apologize. So yeah. So I guess we are potentially breaking that, but I think, I guess I feel like I know. I don't know. Is Jose, are you actually objecting to colors giving red equal blue giving false, or is it really the graphics case that are you drawing a distinction between them, or are you including them?
Well, the question. Go ahead.
I'm more worried about the general idea of going too far with equal. So in my opinion, equal has always been a bit careful with this type of thing. I find it to stay unevaluated more than I was expecting it sometimes.
I'm sorry. So which you're saying with colors, it stays more unevaluated than you expected, or what?
I mean, colors might be a case in which I might be okay, but now that we are going into graphics is still, I consider graphics a bit too much.
Right, because graphics is sort of a general symbolic thing, right? Where, yeah, I guess that's sort of my feeling. Colors make sense to me because they're kind of numerical, whereas graphics feel sort of more, and right, graphics can be arbitrarily nested and complicated. They're sort of really a symbolic thing.
What you're talking about is there are really three levels. There's same Q, there's equal, and there's something else. Is it somehow equivalent? It's like similar Q or something.
Equal by.
I see. Well, that's interesting because let me point out something that in our grading system for the question answering stuff, this, is x plus 1 all squared equal to x squared plus 2x plus 1? If you're doing advanced math, those two things are equal. If you're trying to learn basic algebra, those two things are not to be considered equal.
Mm-hmm. Right. If the problem is expand x plus 1 squared.
Yes, then, so that's an important case, which we are now handling in some way for the assessment functions. And I think maybe we should learn from that. I mean, in other words, in fact, now that I think about it, that project must require these kinds of equivalence testing, because they also have the issue of if you've got a graphic, is it the same graphic? So, I mean, I think what I'm coming to, yes, I don't think it's quite equal by, but it's something like that. Maybe it is that, where it has sort of a string name for different kinds of equality testing, and that we do not do this for graphics, but we probably do it for colors, and we draw the line at colors.
So maybe
are you suggesting that we do this as an equal evaluates for colors, or something?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm suggesting it evaluates for colors, does not evaluate for graphics. It does not evaluate, obviously, for x plus 1 squared equal x squared plus 2x plus 1. Boy, that's about the limit of my by hand algebra. I'm sure that those capabilities have atrophied in the 40, how many years is it now? 44 years that I've been doing this by computer. Anyway, but never mind. and that we consider yet a new function that plugs into the assessment framework, and that is this equal by effectively construct. We don't have an equal by, we have an equal to. Yeah, actually, equal by is an interesting name idea, now that I think about it. Yes, I agree. Comments?
Kind of like equivalent by better, but equivalent maybe has other meaning in our language already.
No, I'm not sure it does.
So Piotr, you wanted to say something.
Yes, I want to go back to the image case. So Steven, if you type image of red equals to image of blue, it returns false right now. So this is already inconsistent with what we have for colors. And I believe we should make this consistent. Image 3D and colors should behave the same with equal.
Right, and I think the argument is, my understanding of the argument is that image and image 3D are representations of 2 or 3-dimensional numerical arrays, and we know how to compare numerical arrays.
So I'm sorry, what is being argued here? You're saying that this already works. So if I say image of, if I have 2 different images, do they, let's say I say random image, are you saying that 2 different random images will give false?
Right.
Oh, for God's sake, this is such a frigging disaster area. Okay, so you're saying if I take random image and I say that random image there, and then I change its size, so I take that image, and now I literally go like this equals, and then I take this, and then I change its size like that, and I compute it. Oh, for God's sake.
Right. So that's the thing that Piotr wanted to change, and where I was a little bit uncomfortable because of, we don't do that for, I mean, you'd see the same thing in graph, and with graphics, it would just return unevaluated. And maybe the arguments is that graph and image are AdamQ things, right? Image is AdamQ, right? Once it actually turns into a proper image.
Yes, it is.
Oops.
So right. So that's I guess that's a good argument why image should be, we should actually do comparisons with image, because it's right. It's the same reason why strings, we actually compare them, and graph, we actually compare them, because they're
that's just wrong. That's just wrong.
Yeah. Right. Presumably if you did graph isomorphic Q, you'd get true. In fact, at least I hope you'd get true if you did graph isomorphic Q on those. But
so what if you change the aspect ratio instead of the image size?
Of an image.
Well, I meant of graph, but
of graph.
Sort of what is the right? It comes down to what is the defining property of 2 graphs being equal.
This is identical to the issues that are coming up in this observer theory stuff in the physics project. It's just
another thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
There is also the 7 bits of tolerance in equal. I'm wondering whether necessarily that's going to be the case in all these other cases we're considering. It may be that for colors, it's very important that there is no tolerance, for example, or something like that.
No, there isn't. We are but perceptual creatures, and we can't tell the difference between red, perfect red and 0.999 red.
Right. And I mean, Piotr can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe when you're comparing images, the difference between same Q and equal right now is that, same Q compares the numerical entries with same Q tolerance, and equal compares them with equal tolerance.
Yes, exactly. If everything else matches, because we compare all the options, then we're looking at numeric arrays that store pixel data, and we use different tolerance for comparing numeric arrays.
Right.
And how do you handle bit depths?
The picture we have on the screen here of a graph in two sizes and whether they're equal is the nub of our problem. I bet Christopher would have an opinion about this. What would Christopher say? What would his opinion be?
Oh, I think we all have opinions about this. It's just whether we agree.
They're not necessarily the same opinion.
I know, but I think my initial opinion about this is this should be true. But if you turn the graph green, should it be true? Probably not. If you change the vertex sizes, should it be true?
I was going to say we have 10 people in the meeting and we probably have at least 11 opinions.
The more I think about this, the more I think this is an abuse of equal, and we need some new symbol in which we can specify in the second argument what are we looking for. And then you can.
What do you think this should do? Do you think this should remain unevaluated?
With equal, probably unevaluated, but with that new symbol, then we can specify in the second argument whether size matters or not.
Yeah, I know, an equal by type thing.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, just if we have that symbol, then a lot of things can return unevaluated for equal, and if you want, and then
then my argument would be that we should back out of everything. You know, we shouldn't do colors with equality. We should just keep what we have with equality testing and not test anymore. Well, I don't know. Raw colors I'd probably be okay with, he says. I think I'd be okay with that one because I think they are.
Well, okay. So changing direction for a moment, and I haven't tested this. You know, what does equal do for, say, two geopositions of differing precision? Does it use the 7-bit thing, Jose, or?
Does.
Well, if it does automatically, for example, it has been suggested several times that if you have two geopositions in which the longitudes varied by 360 degrees, equal should return true. And it does. It doesn't right now. But again, it's one of these cases in which I always consider it's a slippery slope.
I think what we're concluding is we need equivalent by or something, and we need to give it a second argument. And you know, the real thing to state in the second argument is what is it like, you know, examples of second arguments. So if we imagine a you know, equivalent by or equal by. Let's say rather equal by, and then we say something like geo1 equal is Verogs, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a good reason to call it equivalent by. Okay, so let's say geo1 geo2. We're going to need a Verogs form of this, but we could presumably do that with fold if you have to.
I was thinking it would be a list in the first argument, actually.
Eric, what about the following possibility that that the following works? Criterion, and then in the curried form, it can take a Verogs. That would seem quite nice to me. That it's single, that form works like that, but then the curried form can work with.
What about only having the curried form, and like you can do empty brackets for some automatic default, and you know?
I'm not sure. Let's write down what some of the criteria are. Okay. So, okay, what are the categories? We've got numbers. And I think there are things like, you know, issues are, e.g., complex numbers with 0 imaginary part. Or maybe those are simplified automatically, I don't know.
They don't necessarily simplify automatically, but I mean, equal will ignore, right, a real and a complex that with matching real parts and zero imaginary part are equal to each other.
Right, but so what I'm saying is that equivalent by should allow one to even back off from that kind of equality if one wants to. So there are various precision things here. Numbers, e.g., numbers have to have the same precision to be equal. That could be one thing you'd want.
I mean, if it's really an equivalent by, right, you might ask for like parity when comparing.
What do you mean by what kind of parity?
Even or odd. Like if you're comparing integers, you might want the equivalence by parity.
I see. I consider that more obscure. Okay, so we've got geo.
Well, I mean, equivalent modulo, some number is, the first, one of the first equivalences you get to in math.
But I mean, then.
Right. I mean, then it is basically mod, but
yeah,
right.
I mean, it might be syntactically nice to be able to say something like this. And then the alternative is well, I don't know, numerical value or something. I don't know quite what that means, but okay, there's geo, there's graphs, there's images. So in graphs, it would be something like graph connectivity, equivalent by graph connectivity, i.e., don't care about styling.
Or even embedding.
Yeah. That's basically equivalence of edge lists or adjacency graphs or whatever. And then there would be, somebody is typing rather loudly. Graph appearance, i.e., ignore size. I'm not sure it's the right name. But everything else matters. I mean, it's kind of like graph form. Pretty soon we'll be going to Aristotle's theory of causes. But you get what I'm saying here. Ignore the size, but everything else matters.
Yep.
And probably graph embedding is a separate one that you can have, whatever styling you want as long as.
I see. Yeah, that's probably another case. Orcrus on a livestream asked if equivalent by of criterion geo1, geo2 is equivalent to equal of the crits of the geos. No, it isn't. It's more complicated than that because, for example, in the case of numbers with numerical precision, there's a complicated containment thing that has to be tested. So it really is a thing. It really has content just in pure, it has unique content related to its equivalent by criterion. Whoever's typing loudly, please. Okay, so what other categories are there other than these? So geo, it's this question of longitude, modding.
Yeah, or whether, for example, they have the same datum.
Yes, same. Okay, so this is geo by geo position, which means that it doesn't matter, i.e., don't care about the, I mean, if it was a geogrid position being equal to a geo position, maybe that's confusing. Don't care about how the point in the Earth is, how the point on the Earth is specified, just where it is. I'm not sure that's the right name for that, but that concept is there.
I was going to say we potentially also get into cases where, you know, whether a multi-geo position is equal to a list of equivalent geo positions.
Whereas what if this geo position is on an electron, then 360 degrees isn't enough to be equivalent.
Yeah.
Dates will be another area.
Yes, dates is an important one. You're making me wonder about fermionic black holes. In supersymmetric gravity, that must be a thing. Is it, guys? Are there black holes that are effectively fermionic so that they have spinor, so they don't have 360-degree identity rotations? My physics moment question. At least two people here might have a serious opinion about that.
I don't know of any off the top of my head, but I don't see an obvious reason why it's impossible in Sugra.
I've never heard of it.
Okay.
Me neither. I mean, black holes tend to be very large, so
yes,
quantum numbers are
right,
large.
but they can still be fermionic if they happen to be a half integer, whatever. Except I don't think anybody thinks about that. Okay. Anyway, so
and your point would be that it also that in supergravity it would come, you know, if there's a bosonic black hole, there must be. It's fermionic superpartners.
Exactly.
And yet this rings no bells.
Nor for me. Okay, we got three, at least, yeah, probably arguably four physicists at least here. And all right, I'll have to investigate that. That is a quite separate discussion, which we didn't expect.
It'll be streamed tomorrow.
Actually, there is a, I'm looking up here. Wow. There is some literature on my gosh, there's one here on fermionic vacuum around a Kerr black hole spontaneously decays to form a co-rotating Fermi sea. Okay, there's a huge mess associated with this probably. Okay, onward. Okay, dates. Yeah, clearly even time zone equivalents. What do we do with that right now? Two dates that are the same time in different time zones. Are they the same or not?
I think so. If they are equivalent under time zone convert, I think they are considered the same. Under equal, no.
No, I understand. So you're saying if I say now, and then I say time zone convert that to UTC, can I do that? Yes. Okay, now I say %298. Oh, wow. So dates are another, we've got to inventory and we've got to put this on the equal page. Which of these things has this kind of auto checking? Because we found colors do, no, colors do not. Dates do.
Images do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay, so this page is pathetically inadequate.
For example, another case in which I implemented equality is permutation groups. If you have two permutation groups given by different generators but representing the same group, they do return true under equal.
Wow. Okay, that's one I wouldn't have seen coming necessarily.
In a sense, I always thought of equal as being mathematical. So when it's mathematical objects, it's kind of better defined. In maths, there's a tendency to have uniquely defined equality method. It's not always the case.
Your point is that they're not same Q, but they're equal, just like 1 and 1 point.
Right.
Well, that's a bad example because the fact that that on the number line, 1 and 1 point, it's a hack that we have this 1 point concept on the number line. Yeah, Sandra is asking about sound, video, and audio. I have no idea.
Yeah, Piotr, what do audio and video?
Video
video is probably impossible, right? Because it's just a URL.
We just merged the PR, so it's going to be new in 13.1, unless we decide to change it now. That we're looking at the file location. I mean, the first argument for video object is this file or URL, but that and if basically find file returns true for both, then it returns the same string for both, then they are equal. Wait, but
the contrapositive is the important one. That is, if the URLs are unequal, do you then assume that the videos are not the same?
So video of URL in 13.0 already, if I'm not mistaken, downloads that URL before it returns. So we always have a local file created, and we.
But the question, no, that's not the question Steven's asking. The question is, if you get two different values for for find file,
yes,
do you return false?
I believe so. Yeah. And we have few options of video object that we also consider for equal, like specifying the tracks, video tracks, audio tracks. If they don't match, then equal is going to return false.
We need to wrap this discussion, but okay, what's needed here is a proper inventory of what equal is doing right now, and all of these various. Oh, by the way, there's the special equality test here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And yeah.
So the short answer is we're deciding not to make any changes right now until we've completed this inventory.
I think we could do the color thing. I'm not too worried about the color thing with raw colors, but anything to do with images, graphics, etc. We need the inventory. We also need to interact with the assessment function folk to find out what they've done.
Okay, can you tell me who the assessment function folk are? Or can Avery tell me who they are? Because I don't know who they are.
Well, Steven Schroeder is a good person to start with.
Yeah,
okay.
I got that. I can forward that along.
Okay.
Okay. I think that's it for now here.
Okay.
Good.